Good morning. This is Crystal Woods with Seasons in the Vine, and it's Fresh Friday. And we are in Esther 3 today, just moving right along. It's not a super long chapter. We'll see how it goes. Let's pick up with verse 1. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the Haggite, the son of Hammedatha, and advanced him and set his throne above all the officials who were with him. Okay, so he's been promoted. Now, an Agagite. There's two, in the commentaries I researched and the history I looked at, there's two places this could refer to. There was, it seems, a Persian king or a Persian leader of that name. So it could be he came from that area. But also what a lot of the places that I read through in my prep for this were saying was that he was a descendant of King King Agag, A-G. And this was the king of the Amalekites. That's an ancient enemy of Israel from Exodus 17:8 through 16, who was defeated by King Saul, but King Saul didn't always listen to the Lord exactly, and he bypassed exactly what the Lord said to do with the Amalekites. And so he let King Agag live, and he was to destroy everyone. So when Samuel finds out in 1 Samuel 15:1 through 33, great, crazy story, you should look it up, he kills him. And because Saul let him live, but it says he cut him to pieces in the sight of the Lord. Yeah. So anyway, he could have been a descendant from that ancient enemy of Israel. All right, hopefully I don't have to say that name again. That was a tough name for me. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. I mean, he's given him a big promotion and everybody needs to be okay with it. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Now, why? So there was a little bit of a divide in my research as well with this. Some said right from the start, it's because he's a Jew and he didn't bow down. But we don't see him having a problem following the king or bowing down in that regard. So what is it about Haman in particular? So there was a little bit of a debate. Some say it's because he was a Jew and we're looking at a situation similar to Daniel. And others said, no, because we're not seeing that characteristically in Mordecai. It seems like he has an issue with Haman. Okay, and then a little further on, it talks about how he is a Jew. He discloses that he's a Jew. So let's talk about the protocol of paying someone homage at this time. So Persians of equal rank would kiss one another on the mouth. Yep, fun. Now, someone with a slightly lower status would greet a superior with a kiss on the cheeks. If there was a great difference in their status, then they would bow down. They would prostrate down, and that was the required protocol. So Mordecai's refusal could be because he's a Jew, but it could also be because he's like, hey, this dude isn't really above me. I'm having a problem with that. It might not have had anything to do with worship, even though some commentaries said it did. Another one said it could be that he just didn't want to acknowledge Haman had this much of a big difference in status than him because he didn't think that was valid. And it seems like he has some awareness that Haman's like a bad dude. And so one of the application piece for this is I want you to ponder, when have you given your authority over and your homage over to someone or something that has not been worthy of that? And ultimately, are you answering to Christ about who you sit under? And just because someone has title, like Haman has been promoted, that doesn't mean that God is doing that. That was a human decision. And so will you bow down to that kind of authority or not? Because what the Lord's been teaching me in the last several months is every time you yield to someone's ill motive or something evil in someone else, you've literally given over authority to stand against that because in some ways you come into agreement. So had Mordecai decided to bow down and honor Haman, he's coming into agreement with someone who's very, very evil. And as we're going to see, very much against the Jews and wants them taken out. Does that make sense? So as we go through this, that's the application today is who are you yielding to? And is that someone the Lord Jesus has told you to yield to? Yeah. So there we go. All right, let's pick up and keep going. The king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" And when they spoke to him day after day and he would not listen to them, they told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand. So they go to Haman and they're like, "Hey, this guy's not doing this. What do you think about that?" For he had told them that he was a Jew. So now, remember, he's told Esther all this time, don't reveal that you're a Jew. But Mordecai has revealed that he's a Jew. So why? Is that because this is about a worship thing? Or is it what some of the other commentaries proposed, which was that it wasn't a worship thing necessarily, it was a status thing? I mean, we just don't know because it's not saying it. But we can hold the tension of those two opinions. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So he withheld so as they had made known to him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews. So he's like, all right, I'm not going after just Mordecai. I'm going to get rid of this entire population of people. He sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. Verse 7, in the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast that is, they cast lots before Haman day after day, and they cast it month after month till the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Okay, so this casting of lots, is where we get the Feast of Purim. And that's what comes out of the book of Esther. So keep that in mind, because this is like how all of it's going to go down, is this idea of casting lots. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that. First, we need to know the 12th year of Xerxes, or Ahasuerus, is 474 BC. So Esther has been queen at this point for about 4 years. Casting of pur is the Babylonian word for lots, or the Persian word for lots. Archaeologists have discovered examples of these clay cubes, kind of like dice, which go all the way back to the 3rd millennium. The purpose of casting lots is to determine what would be favorable. In particular, what is the favorable time for Haman to present to the king this idea of getting rid of all the Jews. So there's an action that takes place, and he needs to figure out when he's supposed to do that. So with that in mind, in this context, it might have been a board with all of the months written on it, and then he's rolling the dice to see what month it lands on, or the die to see what month it landed on. That was one of the suggestions in the commentaries of what it could have looked like based on what's been found by archaeologists. Now, this is the rule that was consistent in all the research I did. That answer would have to be 3 consecutive throws, like that month in particular that he was going to go to the king. And anytime someone cast lots, it would be 3 consecutive throws of the same answer that would confirm it. So they're looking for some kind of divine intervention or something to align so that they have the wisdom that they need. All right, pretty interesting. And that 3 in a row rule was of this time period. I didn't see anywhere where it traveled on or had any proof. So don't think it's always that way, because I know there's casting of lots when Jesus is being crucified, when they divide up his clothes, and then there is the casting of lots to figure out who the new 12th disciple is going to be to replace Judas. Different time period. But either way, in this time period, I do have the proof that it would have been 3 times in a row that would have confirmed that one answer. So pretty cool. Whew. Verse 8, then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad. So he's gotten the timeline. He now is going to the king. There's a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples of the provinces of your kingdom. Remember, the Jews are taken into exile and they are beginning to be dispersed. It's called the dispersion in Jewish history. It's very critical. A lot of the promises in the Old Testament are that the dispersed people will be united again and come together. So that's what's happened. That's how we know he's talking about the Jews. Their laws are different from those of every other people. They were God's people. They were very, very distinct. And they do not keep the king's laws, so that it is not to the king's profit to tolerate them. So now we see, well, because these people aren't obeying King Ahasuerus, that's what he's presenting, even though it doesn't seem like there's been an issue thus far, now it's time to eradicate them. Verse 9, if it pleases the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed. Haman is going for it. This is an evil, evil plot from an evil man. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, that they may put it into the king's treasury. That's a lot of money, millions of dollars in this day and age. This is what that 10,000 talents would have been. So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman. So the ring represents authority. We know from the prodigal son, like the ring, it's like here, do what you can, and you have my backing. So when Mordecai's like, I'm not coming into agreement with this, like it's very much an authority thing. Like what you align with is very, very, very important. So think about that. Think about, is there any compromise? Is there any alignment? Because they have the signature. He's going to have the signet ring, which is like the signature of the king. So the king is saying, everything you do has my backing. Whew. Gave it to Haman here's that word again, Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the money is given to you, the people also, to do with them as it seems good to you. So he gives them like full authority. This is crazy. But remember, King Ahasuerus, he's not making a lot of decisions solo anyway. He's definitely surrounding himself with people. And so it's like Haman presents an idea and he's like, hey, I listen to ideas from people all the time. Sure, go ahead and do it. Not a very strong, independent leader. Then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and an edict, I'm calling this message the Edict of Death in the land, according to all that Haman commanded, was written to the king's satraps and to the governors over all the provinces and to the officials of all the peoples, to every province in its own script and every people in its own language. It was written in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's signet ring. So sealed, you have my permission. So what you align with, very important. Who's backing you? And is that a pure backing or is that a compromised backing? Who are you affiliated with? Letters were sent by couriers to the king's provinces with instruction to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. So not only are they going to be killed, everything that's theirs is going to be taken. All right, so a lot of greed. Remember I told you, like, deception is usually paired with the love of money. It's the idea of gaining, of having extra security or finances or title or position. Okay, so because of how big the empire was, it took almost a year. So that's what you need to know. Like those dates and those timelines there, it took almost a year to get the edict from the king. Like that day the signet ring is sent, to getting to all the provinces saying this is what we're now doing with the Jewish people. It's pretty intense and pretty serious. Verse 14, a copy of the document was to be issued as a decree to every province by proclamation to all the peoples, to be ready for that day, this day that's coming when all the Jews are going to be killed. The couriers went out hurriedly by order of the king, and the decree was issued in Susa, the citadel. Remember, this took a whole year to pass where everybody got the information. And the king and Haman sat down to drink. So like they're totally at peace with their evil ways. They're like, hey, we're good. You're good with me? I'm good with you. Okay, we're good. Okay, that's a problem. Like, don't base your right standing with God because somebody else says you're good. You need to be seeking the Lord for what you're doing, what you're signing off on. Now, these aren't believers, but I want us to be able to transfer that to ourselves. Like at the end of the day, we need to know that what we are aligning with and what we are putting forward is actually stamped, sealed, signet ring, if you will, by the Lord. It's important. It's imperative. But even though they're fine and they're sitting down to drink, other people aren't. It says the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. The Jews had really become a part of them. Like many of them went back to Jerusalem, but those who stayed, like Esther, who the king doesn't even know is going to be threatened by this ruler because he doesn't know she's a Jew. So they're like, hey, when did these people become a problem? Right? When? Oh my gosh, this is so good. Like if somebody's telling you someone is suddenly a problem, you need to test that with the Lord. Like don't take their word for it. Where do we see King Ahasuerus really bowing down to the wrong authority? He's even giving his authority to Haman. Well, in that moment where he's like, hey, the Jews are a problem. Really? Have they historically been a problem for us in Persia or Babylon? No, actually, it's been pretty uneventful. They even had a lot of favor. So it hasn't been an issue, but now suddenly it's an issue. Suddenly this group of people is an issue. Well, what's the Lord saying about that? Because I hear what you're saying, but I'm not sure I'm getting confirmation. Once again, think about that. When an accusation is thrown out, don't just take someone's word for it. Go vertical. Go right to the Lord and seek the Lord on that. Oh my gosh, I cannot explain how important this is, because we see this attack come against the Jews because nobody is discerning Haman's motives. His motive is to remove the Jewish people because they're not honoring him. They're threatening his leadership. Mordecai is threatening his title and he doesn't like it. And so he's like, okay, now I'm going to say something against them that's not true, but because I got to get rid of them. Okay, scary leadership. Haman is an example of scary leadership, and King Ahasuerus is also a scary leader because he gives his authority away to someone who just makes up something about the Jewish people. It's a big deal. So don't take someone's word for it. Check their motives. If Ahasuerus would have said, like, Haman, is your heart pure? Oh, no, it's not. So you have another motive. This whole thing could have been avoided. Discernment is key, folks. So take that application and run with it as you will. But just because someone in high position says something about someone else or a group of people, it doesn't mean it's true. Could they possibly have been threatened and are trying to get rid of the threat? Much love. See you next week.